Whether you visit our many historic sites, explore our thousands of acres of parks, launch a business, or study at one of our acclaimed universities, you'll agree Mercer County has it all. Mercer County, picture yourself here. Mercer County Executive Brian Hughes and the Board of Commissions are proud to sponsor Mercer Local Influencers.
Presenting Mercer Local Influencers, featuring leaders in our community whose positive influence is bringing energy, growth, and vitality to Mercer County. Presented by YourTownTube.com, Fifth Feb and WellTube, and Stimulus Brand.
The Hillier name, Bob and Barbara Hillier name, is associated with a wide range of work: educational facilities, corporate headquarters, public buildings, residential architecture, almost anything you can name, and it's been designed to a high level of quality that has earned them over 300 design awards, and it's also had a reputation for being well managed.
We started out as his own firm, really, from the very beginning, small commissions, working his way up to run the third largest architectural firm in the United States. And then he went on to merge with RMJM to form the third largest architectural firm in the world. For most of us, that would probably be the culmination of an amazing career, but that really wasn't enough for the Hilliers, and now they've formed Studio Hillier because they really still had that passion to create.
Welcome, Mercer Region. Welcome back to our episode of Mercer Influencers. I have a very special guest today. Bob Hillier has joined us. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
It's great to have you. I've known you over the years. I followed your footsteps at the Chamber of Commerce as chair. So I'm so excited to talk to you today on camera and get your thoughts as to how you have been influenced and how you came to your career and continue your career. So the early days were something we spoke about before. You, it seems to me you learned early on to be industrious and endeavored at a number of projects as a young guy in the area. In high school, you were at Lawrenceville, the Lawrenceville School?
I was actually at 3 different high schools. 4 actually. Yeah, I went to Princeton Country Day School, then to Lawrenceville for a year, and then my father got a job in Washington, and I went to Falls Church. I went to Princeton High then for 6 months, and then I went to Falls Church High School, and I never opened a book by the time I got to Falls Church High School, and I became a campus politician, I guess, and ended up being elected president of the senior class. And my parents noticed that I was getting straight A pluses and hadn't cracked a book all year and was having a good time because it was the first time I had girls in school. And so they said, "You're going back to Lawrenceville." And so I went back to Lawrenceville and worked my butt off and got into Princeton, and that was it.
Started from there.
Yeah.
You also told me that your father said you have to contribute towards your tuition at the Lawrenceville School.
Well, that was the first year at Lawrenceville. The tuition for a day student was $3,300, and at the time the tuition at Princeton was $1,250. And one night I was 13 years old, and he called me into his study and he said, "We have to talk." And he said, "Your mother wants you to go." She's very ambitious. "Your mother wants you to go to this fancy school down the road, and we can't afford it. But I'll make a deal with you. If you earn half the tuition, which was $1,650, I'll let you go."
Right.
And so I was breeding tropical fish as a hobby, and I worked out a deal with my mom to put a little alcove in her flower shop where she was selling pots. She agreed to let me set up a bunch of aquariums. And so I did the aquariums, and lo and behold, I was in the business of selling tropical fish, and I had to go to New York and buy them wholesale and bring them back to Princeton. And the students started to buy them on Friday afternoon. They'd come in and they'd buy a red and a blue Siamese fighting fish. And then they'd go and have it like a dog fight while they're drinking their beers. And every Friday I would sell 3 or 4 pairs of these Siamese fighting fish.
So you had a continual supply of customers.
Right. And at the end of the day, when I turned 65 and I went in for Social Security, the woman said, "What were you doing? You made $3,700 when you were 13 years old." So I more than topped my dad's deal.
And I guess when you came back then to Lawrenceville, you mentioned that you had a roommate who was deciding to go to MIT, and you decided, no, I want to go to Princeton University.
No, Normie Dorff who became an architect, and he went to MIT. We played soccer. He was the right wing, I was the left wing at Lawrenceville. And he went to MIT, and Thanksgiving time we got together and we were kicking balls around. And I said, "So what have you learned at MIT?" And he said, "I've learned how a toilet flushes." And he said, "What have you learned at Princeton?" I said, "I've learned there's a guy named Homer." And that was the difference between the two schools at the time. MIT is very technologically oriented, but that has changed a great deal in 65 years.
Yeah, so this is going back some time.
Yeah.
So your early years, certainly local, and you graduated from Princeton University. What happened next for you?
I got my master's degree, and I went to work for Ray Bowers, who had Fulmer and Bowers Architects and Bowers Construction Company. And Labatou, who had been my thesis advisor, walked into their office and said he had just been awarded the Stewart Country Day School, and he wanted to joint venture with them because he was not a licensed architect. And so I got assigned to working with Labatou and did all the detailing on the design for Stewart Country Day School, including the head of Christ, which we started with clay, and then we did it in paper, and then we started to do it in wood. And and I was out in the job, and the superintendent was pushing it. "I need the Christ head. I need the Christ head to go in the column." And so I had done 7 different noses of the Christ head, and Labby just could not be happy with the noses. And I kept resawing wood to build the formwork, all in reverse, negative, to get the nose right. And he came, and then I got a call from my mother-in-law that my wife was going into labor. And so I told him, "That's the nose you're going to get, and if you fire me, okay, but it's got to go in the column today." And that was it.
So you became a sculptor too, in addition to becoming a father.
Yes, yes, and so that was the deal with Labatou, and then and that is, I'm still very proud of that sculpture, actually. The way I became an architect is interesting because I was a class officer my freshman year, and the guy who was designing the dance decorations, the whole idea of dance decorations was you took Dylan Gym and turned it into a fantasy land. And the guy who was doing the dance decorations flunked out, and so I stepped in as a class officer and said, I can do that. And I ended up spending a lot of time doing the dance decorations, and my grades went from straight A's down to B's and C's. And so I went to Professor Challoner, who was my advisor, and I said, there's got to be some way I can have as much fun as I'm having doing the dance decorations and still get better grades. And he said, go talk to the people in the architecture school. And that's how I became an architect, basically.
Well, wonderful story and good guidance from those that you were going to for advice. And,
yeah.
And that led to, as you mentioned, the Stewart Country Day School project, which was early on. You also told me that that wasn't your only business activity there. You also sold properties up along Stewart Road?
Well, I didn't. Well, no, that was for Kendall.
Okay.
Herb Kendall, through my mother's connections with Mrs. Kendall, I got a summer job working at Kendall Park, which was a big development. They were building 400 houses a year. And this was all basically right after World War II, and the boomers were basically looking for a place to live, and Kendall had a very inexpensive house. And so I worked for him doing the pre-cutting mill, because everything was pre-cut and sent as a package. And then when it got there, the package was unwrapped, and every piece of wood to build the house was there. And so I was in charge of that. And then at 3 o'clock, I became the night watchman, and then on the weekends I sold houses. I was a marketer in the sales office, working for a guy named Lou Kraft, and who was the sales manager. And my biggest day is I sold 7 houses in one Saturday, and I made $175 because the commission. The sales commission was $25 a house.
Back then.
Yeah, back then.
A bit different now.
Yeah, and the houses were all of like $12,000 also.
Right. So wonderful introduction to all phases of design and build, and that led you to other projects. You told me a story about a bathroom that you once had to fix up.
Oh, that's a great story. I was working, I'd been in practice, I guess, 6 weeks or something, and I was sleeping 4 hours a night and working 20 hours the rest of the time.
Right.
And one Friday night I came in at about 3 a.m. and fell into the bed, and my wife went off with the 2 kids on a Saturday morning. And at 8 o'clock the phone rang, and I picked up the phone, and this gruff voice said, Mr. Hillier, my name is Jackson Martindale. And he said, I have a problem in my bathroom. And I said, well, I'd love to help you out. Let's make a date. And he said, how about now? And I said, well, Mr. Martindale, I'm still in bed. He said, young man, you've started a business and you're still in bed at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning? So, long story short, at 8:45, I walked between the 2 Rolls Royces and knocked on the door, and the butler came and said, Mr. Martindale's waiting for you. And I went up and saw the issue, which was the bathroom had a sink sitting in like this desk, actually, a sheet of plywood with a metal edge on it and linoleum, and it smelled like crazy because the plywood was rotting. And he said, I need a decent vanity. And so I sketched up a vanity for him, and I said, is this what you're looking for? He said, yeah, that's exactly what I need. He said, could you get it made for me? And I said, sure. And I went and saw Tony Almafitano, a great carpenter and friend of mine, and I said, Mr. Martindale wants this. And so he did it and installed it, and I never sent Martindale a bill. And then about 6 months later, my secretary comes in, who was new to the office, and she's shaking, and she says, you're not going to believe this letter. And the letter said, Dear Mr. Hillier, my company, Marquis Who's Who in America, was the publisher. They were the publishers of Who's Who in America, A.N. Marquis Company. And the letter said, Dear Mr. Hillier, my company is going to build a new corporate headquarters in Chicago, and you are to be the architect. Please get in touch with, I can't remember his name now, the president, and make your arrangements with him. And that was it. And so I went to Chicago and met the president, and he was like very negative when I got there, and we started on the 5th floor of a brownstone where their offices were. And by the time we got down to the bottom, he was introducing me as the architect of their new headquarters. So,
a great story and great lead-in then to the start of the larger part of your career. We're going to take a break for a couple of minutes. Bob, if you don't mind. Folks, we'll be back after a brief message from Tom McManaman at Stimulus Brands. Come back.
Do you have a personal brand? Sure you do. You're the light in the room, full of color and energy. You exude presence. You have command and confidence. You're friendly and approachable. Or maybe you're the calm in a storm, quiet and inquisitive, the observer. Do people expect a certain style from you in how you dress and speak? Are you consistent? These characteristics and more present a unique you, which become your brand and essentially your reputation. Remember, your brand is what people will think, feel, say, and even write about you when you're no longer in the room. How well you manage your brand can help you succeed, and it's worth your attention. Learn more at stimulusbrand.com.
Curious about our nation's past? Learn about our history while enjoying the fresh air. See the story of heroes and villains. And don't forget to read about how soldiers lived, or just ask them for yourself. And finish the day with a casual stroll. Come visit us again soon. We've missed you.
Welcome back to the set of Mercer Influencers. We're here with our guest, Bob Hillier. Bob, we were talking about in the first half of the show about your start, your educational background in this area, but then the first big job, which was out in Chicago. When you were working that job and beginning to focus back in the area, you were obviously now at a different level. But you involved still some people from this area in what was to happen next. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'd been in practice about a year, and we were doing, as I said, houses for rich dentists, because my first house client was a dentist. And Herb Kendall came into the office one day and said that Fairleigh Dickinson University was going to build, or had wanted to build a dormitory for 300 kids, and it came in at twice the budget. And so Kendall went up and saw the design of the dormitory that was costing twice the budget, and he said, "You got the wrong architect." And so he came in and told me that he was going to take me up to Fairleigh Dickinson University and introduce me, and that we would, with his advice, we would design a dormitory that would meet the budget. So the idea was, instead of a great big building, we built small buildings with suites in them, and each floor had 4 suites with 3 bedrooms, a living room, and a bathroom, no kitchen. The building could be built in 5 months, and it could be built for basically 80% of the original budget.
Wow.
And it had a lot of interesting aspects to it, which Kendall was a big help with. For instance, a toilet, an institutional toilet that can take a cherry bomb cost at the time about $300, but you could buy a little American Standard residential toilet for about $105. And so Kendall pointed out that if there were 6 students in the room and somebody put a cherry bomb in the toilet, you'd know it was one of those 6. And so it was that kind of thinking, plus we also air conditioned them with heat pumps, which nobody had done. And so it was an air-conditioned building. And then after all that, it was built. It won an AIA Design Award. And with that award, all of a sudden, because LBJ said, "You're going to Vietnam or you go to college," and all of a sudden the colleges were inundated, and we had this little dormitory that could be built in 5 months and very inexpensively. And so we were just inundated with people who wanted us to do this dormitory. And all of a sudden, the office went from 5 people to about 25 people, very fast. And we entered the education market with that. And Fairleigh Dickinson hired us to do that. Then now you have a dormitory. You need a a new dining hall, and then you need a new classroom building, and then you need a new library. And then Fairleigh Dickinson had 3 campuses, and so we started at Florham Park, and then we went to Teaneck, and then we went to I've forgotten where the original campus was, it was a pretty exciting time with just Fairleigh Dickinson work. But on the other hand, Princeton wondered how we were doing this, and we got to do the addition to the Princeton Inn when Princeton was going to go co-ed, and we were able to turn that project around in a summer. I mean, it was that kind of dynamics at the time with schools needing dormitories at a decent price.
So your reputation grew as a result of the work that began with a discussion about the bathrooms sometimes.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And then I did something which was apparently unethical by the AIA standards. I sent out a postcard to all the colleges on the East Coast and said, we wanted to know what you're planning to build, and we had a checklist, dormitories, et cetera. And this one letter came back, or postcard came back, crossed out the whole thing and said, we're building a whole new campus. And that was Bryant College, which is today Bryant University. And because of our dormitory, we won that project, because the dormitory was a very cost-controlled thing. And what was interesting is that, again, the speed of building it was important, because Bryant had sold their campus to Brown University in downtown Providence, and they had 22 months to get out of there. And so we had to design a campus and get it built in 22 months, and total time. And it was a thrill.
And as a result, your reputation expanded, your staff expanded, and we probably need another hour to talk about the many projects that you have been invited to participate in throughout the years. But there were a couple of moments where you decided to keep things local as well. You stayed on staff at Princeton University.
Yes.
I've talked to some architectural professors, and they've said, yeah, you don't get through this school and get your degree without taking Bob Hillier's class.
That's right.
So your influence over a generation of multiple generations of continues.
Yeah, I've been teaching there. This is my 30th year, and they call it Bob's reality check. That's what
not
the
a fantasy
call
land
it
anymore.
And I teach them 2 courses now. One is how to be a good architect, and then the second course is how to start and build and operate your own business. And now, because the whole climate of architecture is changing, I now put a month in the last month of the course on having your own architectural firm to do what I've been doing, which is doing development on the side. So you can practice architecture, but you really don't get paid very well. But if you end up owning a building and renting a building out and then selling it or refinancing it as its value goes up, you can create a very nice nest egg for yourself, which is very difficult to do in the architectural practice.
But again, with instruction from Bob Hillier, you just might have that vision going forward.
Yeah, and my course has gotten really popular lately, because today's young architects are much more interested in making money, and frankly, architects make better developers than developers. They're not as greedy, but they're also risk adverse. And what I have to do is teach them how it's not a big risk to do it.
So your partnerships you've described in our earlier conversation, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the partnership of Barbara, your wife. You met, and there's any number of stories, but I know one of her proudest moments was the year she got her degree at the university. And would you like to share a couple of stories about Barbara and your work together?
Yes. She sent a letter out which was beautifully written, and she said she sent it out to 138 architects, and I was the only one that answered the letter and invited her in for an interview. I was so struck by the letter. Mm-hmm. And she came in with the design of a casino to go in Fairmount Park in Philly. Mm-hmm. And she had gone to Temple and gotten a psychology degree, and then she'd gone to Arcadia, which at the time was called Beaver College, mm-hmm. and gotten an arts and interior design degree. And she came to me, and in describing this casino, which really wasn't very good, she was so passionate about it, mm-hmm. that I fell in love with her at that moment. I mean, mm-hmm. The passion was amazing. And incidentally, I have to tell you, her high school counselor said that she would do very well selling cosmetics in a drugstore. Mm-hmm. And she didn't take that advice. She went to college, got 2 degrees, and then Pennsylvania has a really strange craft law where if you work for an architect for 13 years, you can take the exam without having a professional degree. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of 13 years, she took the licensing and became a licensed architect. But because she didn't have the professional degree, a lot of people didn't think much of it. And so when she retired, she went back to Princeton and got into the graduate program there, where she was old enough to be the mother of all of the students. And she got her degree, and that was the second happiest day of her life, the happiest being when Jordan, our daughter, was born. But we got married 38 years ago, and we worked together for 44 years. So there was 6 years in there when we were just working very hard together.
And you've remarked that you didn't ever really have an argument personally or professionally, which is remarkable because
no, it was always, and I think we created a really good firm because we knew the other person was counting on us, and we each wanted to make sure that we didn't disappoint the partner. And so as a result, we were just getting better and better, and the firm ended up being 500 people strong and the 3rd largest in the country. Mm-hmm. And then we merged with a firm from Scotland, and we were the 3rd largest in the world at that point with 1,200 architects. That was, at this point now, 20 years ago.
Not bad for a guy who sold tropical fish to
No, that's right. Yeah. And there's no question we sold the firm, and I had a great lawyer who said, only take cash, because people who take paper end up going back to save the paper. And so we said only cash, and we had an employee stock ownership plan, and the print boy was making $28,000 a year, mm-hmm. and he got a check for $65,000 because of his stock ownership. And it was just a great. 7 of my partners became millionaires. So it was even though the deal from a professional standpoint didn't work out very well with the Scots, and Barbara and I both quit after 2 years of it. Mm-hmm. It didn't work out well, but everybody was okay with it because everybody made a lot of money on it.
And I'd love to be able to come back and sit down again. So thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We'll be back again next week or in a couple of weeks with another episode of Mercer Influencers. Please join us then. We'd like to thank the Office of Economic Development here in Mercer County for their support, and those of our producing sponsors as well. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.